Of all the officers, Separatist and Loyalist, who fought in the Clone Wars, General Grievous arguably had the most impact on the course of the conflict. As Supreme Commander of the CIS military, Grievous was responsible for overhauling the Confederacy's entire approach to the war, shaping the Separatist droid army into the nightmare we all know and love. But although Grievous was the one who ended up winning the CIS military's top rank, that wasn't always guaranteed. There were other Separatist commanders Count Dooku could have given the rank to, so why did Grievous get it instead? In this video, we'll be answering that question.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
At the start of the Clone Wars, Dooku's top commander was a Force-sensitive Chiss general named Sev'rance 10. It's unclear whether Tan was ever actually given the rank of Supreme Commander, but it's implied that she either had the rank or some equivalent to it until her death on Krantz a month into the war. After Tan's death, the position of Supreme Commander went unfilled for several months, as at that time there was no obvious successor since General Grievous had yet to reveal himself. For the first 4 months of the Clone Wars, General Grievous was a closely kept secret. No one on the Republic side who came face to face with Grievous survived to tell the tale until the Battle of Hypori, in which Grievous made his grand debut, utterly routing a major Republic task force. After Hypori, Grievous took a more prominent place in the CIS military hierarchy, and it wasn't long until he was promoted to the rank of CIS Supreme Commander. There were other contenders for that role, however, including commanders that were seemingly more competent than the aggressive, tunnel-visioned Grievous, like Admiral Trench. But most of the CIS's officers weren't considered for the role, and for one simple reason. Dooku and Darth Sidious intended to let their new Supreme Commander in on aspects of the Sith Grand Plan, and so they wanted someone dedicated to the Confederacy's true purpose, which was terrorizing the Republic and killing as many Jedi as possible. With these criteria in mind, Dooku narrowed his candidates down to General Grievous, Sarge Ventress, and Dirge, all of them prolific Jedi killers and successful commanders. Dooku lured the three of them into a battle on Trenchant Space Station after the Battle of Hypori, pitting Ventress and Dirge against Grievous in a final test to determine who would be the Supreme Commander. Grievous beat his two opponents so badly that both of them, even the nigh invincible, rapidly regenerating Dirge, had to be put into bacta tanks. Dooku gave him his promotion shortly afterwards. However, this contest was more of a final test of Grievous's abilities than a serious factor in Dooku's decision. Truth be told, Grievous had been cybernetically rebuilt with the express purpose of leading the droid army, and Dooku just wanted to make sure he was capable. The rank of Supreme Commander was always going to be Grievous's eventually, because he alone was uniquely suited for it. The CIS military was nothing like your average galactic scale military force. It was a hodgepodge of a dozen different private armies, plus hundreds of smaller, localized planetary security forces, all of which had different orders of battle, preferred tactics, and hardware. For the first few months of the Clone Wars, it was a real mess. The only reason the CIS didn't completely fold during this period was because the Republic wasn't doing much better at the time. This absolute mess of a military meant that the CIS needed a top commander that didn't think like your average officer. They needed someone who could successfully syncretize their fleets and armies and either make up for their glaring weaknesses or turn them into strengths. General Grievous was the man, well, cyborg, for the job. Though the quality of his battle tactics was hotly debated by military historians, no one could dispute that Grievous was an absolute genius when it came to mixing and matching different assets. After becoming Supreme Commander, Grievous promptly fixed the worst of the CIS military's problems, reorganizing both the Navy and Army into uniform, cohesive units. Beyond that, Grievous turned the diversity of the Confederacy's assets into a major strength. Both in his own fleets and on a larger scale, Grievous mixed and matched different types of warships and tanks for maximum flexibility. He got the most out of the resources he had at his disposal, and as we mentioned in a recent video, he made the CIS Navy in particular the best naval force in galactic history. Of course, Grievous was no Grand Admiral Thrawn. His tactics were often extraordinarily blunt, relying on sheer numbers or firepower. He was prone to retreat whenever his plans went sideways, and while that was a hell of a lot better than sticking around when a battle was lost, he never seemed to try very hard to turn battles around, even when it might have been possible. Grievous's preferred approach to war with the Republic was to strike hard, pressing the offensive when it worked, and pulling out to regroup and try again elsewhere when it didn't. It wasn't all that sophisticated. However, that doesn't mean that Grievous's approach was a bad one. On the contrary, it was how the CIS military had been designed to be used. As we've mentioned in our videos about the B-1 battle droid, the CIS military was designed to play to the innate strengths of combat droids to the exclusion of all else. Battle droids would always be inferior to organic soldiers in terms of quality, so instead of fruitlessly trying to compete with organics on their terms, the manufacturers of the B-1 battle droid focused on making their droids easy to coordinate via central computer and mass producible. In this way, they were playing to the droid's strengths, which were the limitless numbers they could be produced in and mass coordination that only Jedi battle meditation could equal. General Grievous took this approach and applied it to the entire CIS military, often to great success. Where more conventional strategists would have tried and failed to fight the Republic on their terms, Grievous waged war on terms much more favorable to the Confederacy. As unsubtle as it is, overwhelming numbers is a good approach if you have the resources to make it work, and Grievous did. For every battle Grievous lost, he won a dozen more, and over the course of the Clone Wars, he won a staggering number of victories for the Confederacy. In Operation Dirge's Lance alone, Grievous captured 26 key Loyalist core worlds, striking deep into the heart of the Republic. He was able to pull this off not just because he understood the strengths of his droids, but because he thought like a droid. Now, General Grievous wasn't a droid, and he was notorious for flipping out on anyone who mistook him for one. But despite his indignation at being called a droid, Grievous really was more machine than man. Part of it stemmed from his transformation into a cyborg, after which he was unable to feel most emotions. But long before he underwent his transformation, ever since he took the name Grievous, he had been steadily losing the ability to feel. The trauma and loss Grievous experienced as a young Kaleesh warrior battling vicious insectoid slavers steadily desensitized him to pretty much everything, leaving him a hollow shell of a living being, driven only by vague hatred. As the Revenge of the Sith novel noted, his droid parts had more compassion than what remained of his alien flesh. Grievous's loss of feeling made him part machine in mind as well as body, and during the Clone Wars, his tactics were often distinguishable because of their cold, emotionless approach to combat. Grievous mostly saw battles as numbers games, and he was wholly detached from the cost of his tactics. He was not only merciless toward his enemies and civilians, but toward his own troops as well, who he was willing to sacrifice in vast numbers if it was tactically advantageous. After all, the Confederacy's factory worlds could just make more. A lot of Separatist commanders were callous in this way, but none of them were quite on Grievous's level. The other Separatist commanders were either too conventional to consider the tremendous sacrifices Grievous was willing to make, or were too inexperienced and hatred-driven to take full advantage of this sort of tactical approach. But General Grievous thought like a machine, and it made him the perfect fit for the droid army. As some of you might know, each of the 3 apprentice-tier antagonists in the prequels were meant to embody a specific aspect of Darth Vader, which they would take to greater extremes than Vader ever went. Grievous embodied the concept of being more machine than man, and unlike Vader, he, or his designers more accurately, completely embraced the notion. That, in our opinion, is what makes Grievous such a great character. But what do you think? Would you like to see more videos about General Grievous in the future? Maybe a long one? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. As always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.